Hey guys, welcome back. Thanks for watching. I was out on my Yamaha FZ1S bike right here. I was out a couple days ago and I was having a great time with it, and I was really kind of getting refamiliarized with it. And as I was riding, I began to ask myself, are motorcycles getting that much better now than they were, say, 15 or 20 years ago, or have they begun to stagnate a little bit? Kind of want to talk about that and discuss a little bit about this FZ1 and my thoughts on those two things. You know, it's weird, if you haven't ridden a motorcycle in, a while, and you ride a different bike, you sort of take on that new bike's feel, and you sort of begin to, have this symbiotic relationship. And I remember when I bought my FZ1, it was the first leader bike I had ever bought. And when I went in to get it, at the time, the sport bike craze was really going pretty good, and I didn't want a sport bike. I wanted something a little milder, a little more upright, and more capable of eventually touring. I think I've talked about that before. But the FZ1 kind of hit all of those things, and there were some aspects of it I really loved and still love, and there were some aspects of it I didn't like. Part of what I was thinking about when I originally began to focus on this bike, the geometry of it, the seating position, the uprightness of it, the engine was a reliable engine that Yamaha had in the R1 before that, so it was a very rock solid platform. Everything about it was checking all the boxes, except when, I actually sat on one and looked at the dash, and I kind of, this is where the old fart in me is going to come out, but looking at the dash and seeing this, asymmetric, there is a tachometer. It's an electronic, the needle swings, but it's not hooked up to a cable like old tachometers used to be. And so that part of it was kind of appealing, but then the left side of it that has the speed and the temperature and all these other things is an LCD display, and this was before TFTs came out. And that was the one thing when I bought my bike that I thought, I'm okay with it, but I would rather, I am still stuck on having, digital, or not digital, but analog gauges, both for speedometer, and I like symmetry. And I always liked when the older bikes that had a big tachometer and a speedometer, and they were side by side, and I really, I kind of like that. And the only lights on the dash were, illuminating the dials and the numbers, or indicator lights that were incandescent. And when the LCDs came out, originally they were very bland, hard to see in some lighting conditions. Now they're much better. And of course there's the TFT screens that basically are like a TV screen. And, they put up simulated gauges and things, or they can, put up anything you want, I guess. I think that is kind of where I was thinking, is that all that's changed? I think with new motorcycles, they put new plastics on, they put different paint schemes, they put, of course, some stuff has changed, but when you get right down to it, the basics of a motorcycle, which is, the geometry, the stiffness of the frame, the tires, the engine, those things, in my estimation, I believe they began to peak in the late 90s and early 2000s. And, obviously by 2005, 6, 7, when this bike came out, you know, a lot of that stuff had been settled on, and when you go and look at bikes, the layout is very much the same. I mean, the seating height on, you know, this type of bike is going to be the same today. There's not much that can change, you know, and it's like you can't improve upon perfection. And, you know, I don't know that you can make the engines any more reliable. And so I think what's happening is motorcycles are becoming more, and I might take some heat for this, but superfluous. You know, I know younger generations have grown up with you know, phones and stuff, and they're always looking at screens for information, and that's kind of normal to them. But I think for me as a 61-year-old guy now, those kind of things I don't want. You know, in fact, both of my ladder bikes, you know, if you look at them, there is some LCD, but they both have the dials. And I still like that, and I don't know where that came from. And so, you know, on my ride, I was thinking about that. And I think of things like ABS, traction control, you know, and blended braking and all that stuff that happens now on modern bikes. Is that something I really need or want, or does it benefit me? And, you know, and again, I'm talking for me. Now, I'm not talking for new people, and I'm not talking for people that are on racetracks trying to cut tenths of a second off of your race time. But for the average rider, I think those things can be good when you're starting, but, you know, after a while, are they really just becoming crutches? In general, you know, I kind of look at those as just, that is what new bikes are, and that's what they've been for 20 years. And in fact, I kind of think that motorcycling, from the performance, and I'm not talking, you know, quarter mile or lap time performance, I'm talking overall performance, I'm talking usability, brakes, and all that stuff, kind of peaked. I mean, you know, once you had 150, 160, 170 horsepower, you know, how much more can you add? And now, you know, modern leader bikes, they've got 200 plus horsepower. My ZX14 has that. You can't really use it on the street. So, you know, they're not going to get a whole lot more powerful. They're definitely not a whole lot faster. I mean, you know, stock bikes, you know, 20 years ago, we're pulling down 10-second quarter miles, and nowadays, with the help of rider aids, you can get a little faster if you know what you're doing, but the average person can't do it, even with the rider aids. And so I guess what I'm getting at is, for the average guy that's not on a track and not out there trying to shave, you know, tenths of a second, are rider aids really something we need? And is that not just, you know, something that manufacturers are putting on motorcycles to sort of differentiate from the older bikes and say, look, this bike has this, 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 and this? And I kind of think that's, you know, and I've talked about this in other videos, I kind of think that's where motorcycling is going now. It's all about, you know, the external stuff, rider aids, you know, things, you know, navigation and stuff like that. Whereas, you know, I'll admit it, I am, you know, becoming my father stuck in my way. But I think, you know, considering all of that we've talked about, when I was on the FZ, I mean, I immediately fell back, you know, into it really quickly, and I was very surprised at how capable this bike really is. And, you know, here it is, it's 18 years old. And so I'm kind of, you know, looking at the markets nowadays, and I think I've talked about this, where I say, you know, if you're an older person, the motorcycles that are out there right now, I think will sustain us. You know, for me, I believe, you know, I've got the last motorcycles I'll ever own. I don't know, you know, what's down the road past 65 or 70 years old. I'll cross that bridge when I get there. But, you know, as of right now, you know, my youngest bike is 9 years old. I wouldn't trade it for a brand new bike. And so that's kind of, you know, my position on this. And yeah, I think the older bikes, they're a great value. And let me know what you guys think. I mean, am I completely off the mark? I mean, do you like the rider aids? I mean, And I get that some people do, and that some people need those things, and that's fine. You know, this is more of just a personal reflection of where I've been in life at different times and where I am now. So let me know what you think. Comment down there below, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll see you next time. Bye.